offers. Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening to wherever you are joining us today to watch and listen along to this episode of Authentic Achievements. And I'm normally joined by the fabulous Dr. Jacalyn, who is the founder, visionary and chief listening officer for Global TV and Radio. And she is here with us, but she's actually producing for us. So today, instead, I'm going to be joined by the amazing Lisa Ventura, who is my friend and co-founder of International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, which we started 4 years ago this year. So without further ado, I will bring in Lisa and introduce her to you. Lisa, hello.
Hello there, Kim. It's an honour to be here this afternoon. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so excited. I mean, one, I always love our conversations, but two, this is such an important subject and one that I know is close to our hearts. One, because we co-founded it, but two, because both of us have had our own challenges with that internal imposter over the years. So could you tell our audience, for those people that don't know anything about you yet, a little bit more about you and your journey, please?
Absolutely. So I have been in the cybersecurity industry now for a number of years, since around 2009. Prior to that, I'd actually worked for a number of years in the entertainment industry, and I worked with the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire here in the UK, Chris Tarrant. Even then, I still had the biggest amount of imposter syndrome of, oh, I'm working with Chris Tarrant of all people, and this sort of thing shouldn't happen to me, and I'm a complete fraud and I shouldn't be here. And those feelings have stayed with me throughout everything that I've done and went on to do. So after that time, I went on to found the UK Cybersecurity Association, which is now called Cybersecurity Unity. And that's a membership and trade body for the cybersecurity profession here in the UK. The rebrand to Cybersecurity Unity means that it can be a more global membership trade association. And I've also done a lot of writing in the cybersecurity field, a lot of cybersecurity awareness training in cyber psychology. I talk a lot about the human elements of cybercrime and social engineering. And I've also been awarded an MBE in King Charles III's birthday honours list, his first birthday honours list, in fact, last year in May. And that was the day I found that out. That was the day I had the biggest amount of imposter syndrome of all. And Kim, as you rightly said, we co-founded the day about imposter syndrome a few years ago. And for me, it's about, really opening up the conversation about it, because until you and I and our other co-founder, Nat, and a few others started sort of, talking about this, but then um, putting our hands up and saying, I feel like this too, this happens to me. I thought I was the only one up until that point, and I felt really, alone until we all started talking about it and sharing our journeys. And full disclosure, I am actually neurodivergent. I was diagnosed with autism in 2018 and ADHD in 2023. And I think that there's a direct correlation between those of us that are neurodivergent and the level of imposter syndrome that many of us suffer. So it's a real honour to be talking about this today and really opening up the conversation about it too.
I love it, Lisa, and you're right. For me, one of the oddities about imposter syndrome is nobody talks about it, because your biggest fear is that someone's going to find out that you're a fraud. So if you tell them you feel like a fraud, they're definitely going to find out. So you don't tell anybody, and therefore the only voice that you can listen to is the one in your head, and the one in your head, whilst utterly plausible, is utterly wrong. And so you get yourself trapped in them. And then, as you say, once you start talking about it, you suddenly realize that you're not alone, that actually you're not the only person that, I for many years thought, what on earth's wrong with me? I'd be having two conversations permanently. The one that I was allowing to come out of my mouth, and the one that was going on in my head going, they're going to find out, they're going to find out, they're going to find out. And it was really hard to kind of make that change. And that is, as you said, it's one of the reasons why we started that International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, to start a movement where people can share that actually this is how I feel. This is what it feels like to be me in these moments. And I'm so super proud of you for being awarded, which you so deserved. But I know that did cause you at that to take you all the way back after all the great work that you've done on kind of turning that inner imposter into an inner cheerleader. But that is also what happens, isn't it, with with this particular phenomenon? You don't always can say, well, I'm over it, I've done it now, it's just behind me, because you come up with a new place, a new situation, and all of a sudden it finds that chink, doesn't it, and comes back at you with a vengeance sometimes.
Absolutely. And isn't it almost insane the way that we talk to ourselves? We would never talk to or consider, talking like that to somebody else, or to a friend or a family member. And yet we will completely just, put ourselves down, tell ourselves that we're complete frauds and we're going to be found out at any second. But we would never tell that to somebody else. And I just find that, just insane that we do that to ourselves, so much.
It's so true. I often think some of the words I use on myself, I would never even think even think about them with another person, let alone think about using them with another person. And it was funny, when I did my TEDx a couple of years ago, they gave me some feedback, and they said, before everyone went on, you were so kind, you were so supportive, you're like, come on, you've got this, you can really go ahead. And they said, what did you do to yourself when, like, just before you went on? I looked at myself and went, oh, for crying out loud, it's 12 minutes and you're not going to die, are you? So just get over yourself and get on. They were like, the difference in kind of how you spoke to yourself versus how you spoke to everybody else. And I was like, yeah, funny, I would never have thought of saying that to anybody else, but to myself, that made so much sense. And, as we've chatted about a lot over the last few years, that is one of the great tricks, isn't it? Is to be able to say, if this was somebody I loved, that this was happening to, we're having this opportunity, that we're doing this thing, what would I say to them? And then say it to yourself so that you can actually be kinder. We're with ourselves 100% of the time. We're the one person we can't get away from. So why do we allow ourselves to be our own worst enemy instead of our own best friend?
Absolutely, and the things that we tell ourselves that we're no good at what we do, that I didn't do that right, or I didn't say that right, or I didn't complete this task correctly, or whatever. And the pressure that we put on ourselves as well to deliver those things, and a lot of it is self-imposed pressure as opposed to deadlines or wherever we work or the things that we do. And I just find it fascinating that insight into that psyche of why, where we tell ourselves, these things that are just blatantly not true, at all. For years, I kept sort of telling myself in my head, you're a fraud. You don't deserve to be in this industry. You don't deserve to transition into cybersecurity. You don't deserve, anything that you're doing. And turning that around has been one of the biggest challenges. And I mean, for me personally, one of the biggest things that I say about imposter syndrome is that I don't think it ever completely goes away. I think there's always some elements of it there, and so I prefer to frame it around managing imposter syndrome as opposed to actually getting over it and never having it again, because I think that's quite unrealistic. So I work on a number of things in a number of ways to manage it when I can feel those thoughts creeping into my head. And I've also, I was actually on a course this last month in January to become a neurodiversity in the workplace trainer. And one of the course cohorts shared something about her own imposter syndrome. And I asked her if I could sort of, take this idea and talk about it, and particularly talk about it during the day. And I'm hoping she'll come on and do a Q&A with me on the day itself, because she said she'd named her imposter syndrome and she calls it Doris. And whenever she feels that Doris is making an appearance, she'll always turn around and say, just go away, Doris, be quiet, Doris, and things like that. And I just found that just so, interesting and insightful that she'd actually, given a name to her imposter syndrome. And I really hope she'll come on the awareness day and do a talk with us about that.
Oh, that would be fab. And I think it's funny, isn't it? I did mine almost the other way. So one of the things that I noticed, and I noticed this in my little girl, is even when she's really scared about something, like the slide's too high and she's got to the top of it, but she's not going to come down because it's too high. That the minute you give her favourite toy, like her little Lenny, all of a sudden she can do anything. And it took me back to when we were kids, and actually I was the same, as soon as I got my favourite toy that clearly was a stuffed animal and wasn't actually going to do anything to help me whatsoever. As an adult, I know that now. But as a child, as long as you'd got that, you were invincible. And so now I've got a tiny version of her toy called Lenny, who sits in my office. And every time I have those moments where I'm doubting myself, I'm like, come on, Lenny, I need you now. Because actually with you, I'm invincible. Because I think you're right. I think it's about, it's like when people, lots of people now do meditation. And I know when I first started out doing that, I was like, I do it wrong. I can't even get that right. I'm supposed to be meditating. I can't even get that right. Because I thought you weren't allowed to ever have any negative thoughts. So you weren't allowed to not be able to just think nothing. And I don't think I've ever been able to not think anything ever. So my brain just doesn't work like that. And then I realized actually it isn't. It's about not judging. It's about letting whatever comes come and go, and then letting it go without passing judgment, without holding on to it. And that's really helped me in those moments where my inner critic starts to chat, because it's like, okay, thanks for that. I respect your opinion, and I'm going to release you now because I don't believe it. It no longer serves me. And some of it was in that, almost externalizing it. So where I remembered at one point, and it really hit home for me, I suddenly thought, actually, you're making your opinion that you're not very good more relevant and more correct and more likely than all these people that you aspire to be like that are telling you you're doing well. So what gives you the right to think that you're more knowledgeable than they are? And I was like, well, I don't. And I don't think I'm more credible because obviously I'm in this. So now what I try and do is go, okay, I'm going to borrow their belief, because I think that is one of the greatest gifts that we have in the world, is we can lend somebody our belief. Whenever we ask them to do something, we ask them to do it because we know that we believe that they're going to be successful. But if we took the moment to actually share that with them, to say, Lisa, I want you to come on today to the show because I know you're going to be epic, and I know that this stuff, you're so credible and you're so real and relatable that you are going to be amazing. That actually that then allows you to be in a much better place to come on and be successful, because you're like, okay, I can borrow your belief that I'm all of those things, rather than that panic that maybe we're not. I think there's so many little things like that we can do to help each other, can't we?
Absolutely. And for me, I've been subjected to a lot of bullying and abuse over my lifetime, a significant amount of it. In fact, going right back to pretty much when I was born, and I was a very young girl. And I've done a lot of work and research as well into whether those that are neurodivergent are more likely to be bullied and abused in their lifetime. And the answer to that is absolutely. And whether it's because other people that are neurotypical sense somehow that we're different in some way, and therefore we're much easier targets. I think that that's certainly a factor. But another interesting element that I found in the course of my research is that into narcissistic personality disorder and those that have narcissistic personality traits. Because when I really started to delve into this area, I realized that all of those that had bullied and abused me in my lifetime did indeed display very, very narcissistic traits, or even full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. They could never admit that they were wrong in any way at all. They couldn't empathize with you. Everything was always about them. Even if you talk to them about yourself, it would be, oh yeah, but this happened to me, or I had that, or whatever it was. They had to one-upmanship you with it's having something far worse than what you had. And I realized that element of narcissism that had been present throughout my life was a big factor in the amount of imposter syndrome I had, with on top of being neurodivergent as well. I had it aimed at me on all sides. And what really helped for me in reframing it all wasn't just going through cognitive behavioral therapy or anything like that. I actually had EMDR therapy to help reframe some of the more traumatic episodes of bullying and abuse that I'd experienced throughout my lifetime. And that really helped me to start reframing imposter syndrome, and also reframing my mindset in terms of how much of that imposter syndrome that I experienced. And I'm not suggesting that everybody goes out and gets EMDR. Mine was because I've been through some significant trauma in my lifetime, as well as the bullying and abuse. But once I'd done that, and that helped me reframe imposter syndrome, I then found some other hints, tips, and things that I'm happy to share as well, that helped me in terms of managing that inner imposter syndrome, and telling Doris to give it a name, as the lady on the course cohort did, to shut up and go away.
I love that. I love that. And it is, I think we get that accumulation, don't we, of experiences and things that happen to us. And what I've found, and it sounds like the same is true in your story, is that all the ones that were positively affirming that we were good we kind of didn't hang on to, and all the ones that actually were detrimental to us, were challenging, actually there we store onto those, don't we? And as a result of that, we start to attract more of them, because what we focus on, we get more of. And it does take a lot of work and a lot of courage to go and face the darkness that you've already been through, because when we've gone through something like that, we kind of don't want to go back and look at it again, do we? Because it was horrible, and it's like, at least it's not happening now. But unless we do go and look at it and take the learnings and do the hard work that you've done to do that reframing, it's always just bubbling under the surface, isn't it? It's like it's always going to be there for us to do more of. So the fact that you've had the courage to do the work and have the courage to share that with people, and to share your experiences, and also the ways that work for you. Because I think that's the other thing with this type of challenge that we've got is, what works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for the next person. But if we share all of them, if we, one of them will hit the right person, and it will work for them. Or they'll see a tiny iteration of it that goes, oh, I wonder if I could just add that and that. And maybe that would be the thing that for me allows me to, to just make that move through, to just be able to regain control, isn't it? And feel like actually you're the one that can determine at the end of the day whether it was a good one or a bad one, because you take back that power and that control in what you're thinking. Doesn't mean to say you never get the bad thought. It doesn't mean to say you never get that that doubt again. But I think it's in the speed within which you can recognize that that's where you're heading, and then use some of these things that you've found along the way to reframe yourself back into, that's a rabbit warren I don't want to go down, thank you very much, and I'm going to come back over here. Could you share with us perhaps some of the ways that you do that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that I do to sort of manage my own imposter syndrome, and as you rightly said, I will caveat these with they may not necessarily work for you, but there are things that I put into place that help me a lot. And I call it, and I've done talks on this as well, because I call it flipping the script on imposter syndrome. So the first thing is that, to recognize, some of the signs that you might be suffering from it, because we can often overlook some of the things that constitute imposter syndrome that, come up as, we get busy in our day-to-day lives, etc. But just some of the thoughts that you might have are things like, you feel like you got lucky when you actually prepared and worked, really hard for something. And you find it really hard to accept praise or compliments when they're given. And you apologize for yourself when you actually didn't do anything wrong. And you find the fear of failure completely paralyzing. So that certainly was something for me. I used to be absolutely petrified of ever failing, or actually being perceived to have failed as well. And the next thing for me is, know you're not alone. Some of the most important encouragement will often come from realizing how many hugely successful people have built amazing careers even while coping with it. And I talk a lot about people like, Albert Einstein, who had a huge degree of imposter syndrome. Maya Angelou, the poet and civil rights activist. But the biggest one of all for me is Freddie Mercury, who was the lead singer of Queen. And I'm such a huge fan of Queen and Freddie Mercury. And the story goes that Freddie was always so plagued with imposter syndrome that before he would go out to do a live performance, he would literally be absolutely physically, sick. And then he would go out and he would have the crowd in the palm of his hands, and he'd come off stage. He'd say to the rest of the band something like, "Was I all right, darlings? Was I all right? Do you think that they like me?" And I just think, God, he had the entire, billions of people in the palm of his hand in that 20-minute iconic Live Aid performance in 1995 with Queen. So if somebody like him could, suffer that degree of imposter syndrome, then I'm in I'm in good company, and of course I could suffer from it too. And another thing for me is, follow your own path and don't compare yourself to others. And I realise that this is quite a really difficult thing to do. But, a few years ago, when I was thinking about launching the trade association in cybersecurity, imposter syndrome stopped me. And although I'd been in cybersecurity for a few years by then, I was thinking, I can't do this. Everyone will think I'm a fraud. I don't have the right skills to launch a trade association. I'm not talented enough to do it, and the list goes on. So I was always looking around at what other people were doing in the cybersecurity industry. And every time I got close to launching it, I panicked, thinking that I just wasn't good enough and that they were all better qualified than me to launch it. So I really had to work hard to flip the script, on those thoughts and go ahead with it, despite some quite significant personal challenges at the time. And it did pay off massively. Um, Another thing for me is to be proud of and acknowledge your achievements. So I find this, really hard to do, but I have a bullet journal, and every week I note down all the wins that I've had and the things that I've done, no matter how small or insignificant that I think that they might be. And some days or some weeks, it might even be as simple as I got out of bed that morning because I was feeling, just not like I wanted to get up or that I wanted to, face the world or do anything. So if I managed to do that and get out of bed, on a particular day, I still consider that a big win for me. So having that bullet journal and noting down, all those things, all those achievements and things that I've done, I then look back on them, and when I get those feelings of imposter syndrome creeping in, that serves as a real reminder for me that, look at what you've done and look at what you've achieved, and that really does help me a lot.
I love that. And I've got a good friend who introduced me to what she called the Big Me Up book. And she recommended everybody had one, which is where whenever anybody said thank you to you, or whenever you've done something and it went well, that you put it in that book so that you can carry it around, like you say, and you can flick through it whenever you have a moment of doubt and go, no, actually, look at how far I've come. Because often we only look at how far we've still got to go. And I loved in that what you shared with, follow your own path, because actually, I say this to Scarlett all the time, the only goal that was really important is that today you are a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. You don't have to, we're not in competition with anybody but ourselves. And we've got to, we've got to start understanding that, which is we've all got a path with which we're supposed to tread. And when we actually start focusing on treading our path instead of focusing on everybody else's path and why ours doesn't look the same, then actually we find more peace and more happiness. And I loved that. So some days that it's getting out of bed or something. I often had days where my goal in life was to adult successfully for 12 hours, not well, not brilliantly, not for anything else, but just adult appropriately for 12 hours. And actually for that day, that would have been, that's what success looked like. And I think once we start to be kinder to ourselves and we give ourselves that freedom to be the perfectly imperfect people that we are because nobody's perfect, then actually we take away just a little bit of that pressure that we are pulling ourselves under with almost all the time. And I think it seems to be getting worse, particularly because we're in a compare and despair society. So we look at the airbrush perfection of everybody else's life and the messy reality of our own. We find ourselves lacking because they don't match up. But the reality is nobody's life is that perfect all of the time. Everybody's got different challenges. And I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, and they said it was interesting. You might look at somebody and go, "Oh, I wish I'd got what they'd got." But if that's what you're thinking, you've got to take all that they've got. So not just the bits you like, you've got to take what they're having to deal with as well to allow them to have the thing that they like. And once you look at it in that lens, you probably don't want it anymore, because you're like, oh no, I'd like that good bit, and then they can have they can keep that bit for themselves. So it's great in that kind of like reframing and allowing yourself to be you, and using that to have the courage to take the action, even though the fear's there. Because I think that again is often, it was something for me I had to learn, which was courage isn't not having any fear. Courage is deciding to be greater than the fear. So, having the fear and kind of doing it anyway. And all of a sudden you find that, once you start to face the fear, it's never as bad as you thought it was.
Yeah.
Whatever it was you were telling yourself, this is going to be awful. You get to the other side and go, that wasn't that bad. But how much of your life have you wasted putting it off and worrying about it, and doomsday looping? I was dreadful for that, Lisa. I don't know if you are as well. Where I kind of I overthink every day could possibly happen, and then a few that probably could never happen, but I'll think about them anyway, just to be on the safe side and make sure that I've covered every angle.
And for me as well, the people pleasing conditioning that I'd had as well throughout my life, and then taking that decision to take that big step back and go. I've been on this planet for about 50 years, and I don't mind saying my age at all. I embrace it, and I've been on this planet for about 50 years, and yet my entire existence has been around. Are they happy? Are they happy? Is my husband happy? Is this happy? Is that happy? And nothing was left at all for me. And interestingly, when I started to set, again, with the help of the therapist that I have with EMDR, when I started to set those healthy boundaries, and people really pushed back, and a lot of the abuse and so on then escalated. But I just took that big step back, and I just went, do you know what? I'm focusing on me now, and that's it. And as long as me and my little world and the people in it are okay, those are the bullying and abusing me, they can just drop off the face of the earth, and that's it. And that was really hard, considering some of the people that was doing that to me. But it's paid off in dividends, and the people that I have in my life are definitely the right people to have. And also, I've got really good at spotting what I call the red flags about people as well. And I've had one literally in the last sort of week or so where I've just gone, no, I don't have a good feeling about this person. I'm not going to engage with them if I can help it in a work capacity. And it's somebody that has come forward, really sort of gushing, wants to help with everything I'm doing in cyber and so on. But he looks a bit and reminds me of a particular bully that I had on my trade association a couple of years or so ago. And because of that, I just can't get past it. And those red flags are just screaming at me. So I'm going, no, do you know what? If I have those gut feelings and I can see those red flags, I'm pulling back and I'm not engaging. And I think social media's got a part to play as well in that whole piece of looking at people's, perfect lives and, what they're doing, and holidays and houses and everything else. And it's just like, no, that my path is my path, and everybody else has got their own path. And, people will say to me, how do you do it? How do you fit it all in? And, my response is, this is called authentic achievements. And so from an authentic point of view, my response is, if my son, who hadn't, had lived and not been stillborn back in 2013, I would not be here talking to you now, because I would have been a round the clock, 24-hour full-time mother, because I knew before he was due to be born that he would have significant disabilities that were picked up on scans. But unfortunately, he was stillborn and didn't make it into this world, so I don't have any living children. But that's my path. That's my story, and I genuinely would not be sat here talking to you now. I would be the full-time mother of my son, who had significant needs and disabilities, and would rightly be focused on him 24/7 and not be doing any of this. So I think it's about as well not judging that book by its cover, so to speak, and not looking at the surface and thinking, oh, she does this, and she's so busy, and she goes here and she does this. But that's not the life I was supposed to have. I was supposed to be a parent, and that didn't happen. So I'm making the best of the life that I do have now, in the hope I can make my son proud of me.
I have absolute faith, my love, that he is so, so proud of you. Never doubt that for a second. I know he will be. And you know, my heart goes out to you. I lost a baby not as far along, and I don't think that I don't think words can describe it for anybody, and I don't think anybody else has the same experience. You know, I always think you can't say, yeah, I know what it feels like, because you don't, and because you're not them, and you don't know what they put through it. And but again, I know when I went through mine, the way I spoke about myself and my failure to be able to bring my child through. And I remember at one point telling myself, like, 12-year-olds can do this. 12-year-olds can do this. This is what you're put on earth to do, and you can't. That's how incompetent you are. I would never say that to another human being. Never think it about another human being. But it shows the depth of kind of just how cruel we can be to ourselves. And I love that you shared with us about that. You know, trusting that instinct. You know, we've learned to ignore our instincts. We've learned to ignore that gut instinct and instead pretend that we're over here being these very logical, very thinking beings. And we're not. We are emotionally driven. And I think having the courage to trust your instinct is the greatest way through these things. Lisa, I could chat to you all day, but I'm very, very conscious that we're coming up to the end of the show, and the show just ends, even if we're still chatting. So before we do that, I would love for you to just share a little bit more about how people can get in touch and how they can join in and help us get the message out there.
Absolutely. So the International Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day this year is on the 13th of April. And we'd love people to get in touch, get involved. We would love to have some, conversations with you on the day. Perhaps have some, panel discussions, question and answer, fireside chats, etc. Our website is iisad.org. Do contact us on there, or drop me an email to lisa@csu.org.uk. And please just spread the word, tell other people that we do have an awareness day dedicated to imposter syndrome on the 13th of April this year. And we look forward to welcoming you to our events on that day, and also opening up that much needed conversation about imposter syndrome.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. And there is just so many things that we could get done. One thing that just struck me from kind of the conversation that we had, and your piece around trusting yourself to be who you're supposed to be, and owning the fact that the path that you're on right now is the path that you're supposed to be on, even if it's not the one you thought you were going to be on. Reminded me of one of my favourite quotes. So I hope you don't mind if I share it before we close. And it was by William Perky, and it is, "You've got to dance like there's nobody watching, love like you've never been hurt, sing like there's nobody's listening, and live like it's heaven on earth." And when we just stay present to where we are and don't allow ourselves to dwell in the past or in worries about the future, we find an inner strength to move through, which I hope helps. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. We are coming to the end now, so thank you for also everybody listening and watching, for joining us here on USA Global TV and Radio. I really look forward to seeing you again in a fortnight's time, and I hope you join us on the other amazing shows that are on this network that has been designed to help you to achieve your dream, whatever that be. Thank you.